house. So I have been in this field for quite some time. I am both a child psychologist and a parent coach. And what I do at this point is 3 days a week, I'm at a school, Agnes Irwin, which is an all-girl, all-female school out on the main line. And 3 days a week, I teach classes to promote emotional and social intelligence. So I am doing something that I love doing. I'm not doing assessment or waiting for the crisis to happen. I get to do prevention. And I use a little yoga, and I use a little relaxation, and I'm teaching the girls, starting at kindergarten, about how to communicate their emotions, how to cope with their emotions, how to work and interact with each other, and also how to build some of those leadership skills early on. Another day, I work here at Greene Towne, and I'm not always here, but I'm here frequently on a Tuesday, and I do observation and consultation. So for any reason your child needs my observing, I don't want you to get all hot and bothered that I'm gonna do an evaluation of your child, because an evaluation is not what I do here. I'm really looking to help teachers and parents come together as a team so that we can get your child to the next level that they need to be at. And sometimes we have concerns, and sometimes I know I've been a parent myself, it's hard. We have this fantasy when we birth our child that they are going to be happy and fine. And what we find out is for each of our individual kids, whether it's early in life or midlife or later in life, they always hit bumps developmentally. And we all have to feel comfortable about accessing prevention, which is what I like to do here at Greene Towne. Finally, 1 day a week, I am all over the city. I was just at Clementine before I came here tonight. And I also have a private practice just doing parent coaching. I don't do therapy, even though I'm trained as a therapist, because I really believe parents are on the front lines along with teachers. I also do a lot of teacher training. Just so you know, I have an only child myself, Peter, who is 24. He is launched. He is graduated from college. He is paying for basically everything himself, living in Dallas as a consultant. And one of the most important things I want you to know is that my greatest fear for my son, who's an only child, is that he would be spoiled and entitled. That was my greatest fear. I never worried that he was going to be unhappy or not smart enough. I was worried he was going to be spoiled. And so I used a lot of positive parenting. Hopefully tonight I'm going to share with you the gist of what I've done, both in the parent coaching I do and with my own son. I can honestly say Pete is emotionally intelligent, he's socially engaging, he still loves to learn, and he's a very hard worker. He is actually went to a friend's school for 13 years, so he believes in giving back and wants to help others, and he's empathic. So I feel like my goal was achieved to the degree that he is not a spoiled and entitled child. And certainly that he's independent, both as a learner and as a person, is really important. So I've given you a whole host of handouts tonight. I don't usually give so many. And I'll tell you why I gave you all of these handouts. The first one that's on the top is the mantras that we're going to go through tonight. That is your cheat sheet. If you ever want to know what positive parenting is, just put this up on your refrigerator, and this will be your cheat sheet. Find one or two of the mantras that you would like to work on now. Maybe not all 7, but maybe 1 or 2 could help at home. The second one is an Inquirer article that was written. If you have a significant other or friend who really doesn't like to read much, but they need it in a snapshot, this Inquirer article was well written, and I loved it for its message. It's my message in a nutshell for tonight. The third handout is called The Power of Positive Parenting. That is more in-depth, but you don't have to take a class in positive parenting. It's all right there for you. This was the best summary that I could find. And finally, a little shameless advertisement. I was just posted in Psychology Today. I wrote a blog with the head of AIS. And the blog is mostly my work on empathy and how to develop it in young children. And it also has embedded a lot of positive parenting techniques. So there you have it. Four handouts, whatever works for you is fine with me. By the way, going with the cheat sheet that I've given you, the 7 mantras, which is what we're doing tonight, I like to use mantras because it's hard to remember all of these tools that people talk to you about, or maybe you even read several books. It's hard to remember what to do when it's happening. So that's why I like mantras, because I can remember things through this. This just helps me. So hopefully it'll help you. It's how I broke it down tonight. Very quickly, in about 2 minutes, what is positive parenting? Does it mean to let your child rule the roost, to whine and carry on whenever they don't get their way? No. That is not what positive parenting is all about. Does it mean to focus solely on your child's happiness, because of course we all birthed our children and we want them so desperately to be happy, at the expense of developing grit, resiliency, empathy, good coping skills, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence? No, I want you to keep your eye on the ball, which is the future. Every year your child gets older, I want you to think about, what should I be teaching that child now? Because 18 years old rolls around so much faster than I could ever have imagined as a parent. And I know, I see so many kids going to college and they don't have a lot of grit, and they don't always have good coping skills, and parents have only focused on the academics, maybe the athletics, maybe the social, but not enough of some of this really important stuff. Does positive parenting mean to overprotect and never let your child experience consequences for their behavior, or never experience adversity? No. I am all about what I call tough love. Positive parenting means adversity teaches kids how to bounce back and be resilient. To protect your child from those adverse circumstances is not always in their best interests. Positive parenting means very clear limits and rules. And as a family, you have to decide what matters to your family. I know what mattered to me. The first thing, and it is about positive parenting, safety. Whenever I had to tell Peter I was doing something that he didn't really love, a lot of times it was because what he was doing or what he was about getting to do wasn't safe, emotionally or physically. So know your goals. Whenever you have to tell your child you're going to do something they're not going to love, sometimes it's because your job is to keep them safe. Your job is sometimes to be the not so good cop. And you've got to feel comfortable being that authority. Positive parenting also means enjoying your kids, but understanding how to do tough love too. And finally, being proactive, not just reactive. I promise I will try to leave some time for questions. And those of you I know who have to scoot, I'll leave about 5 minutes and I'll just hang around if you have any questions for me. The first mantra is one of the most important mantras that I learned as a family therapist in the training that I did with young children. Say it, mean it, and do it. Most of us in this audience are great at saying it. What we don't want our kid to do. But a lot of us don't really mean it, and we certainly don't do it, meaning, you know, we might be one of those people who constantly is threatening. So if you are that parent who finds yourself threatening a lot or not giving good consequences, and your child tends to tune you out, you really need what I call, and this is just one tool that I'm going to give you. It's called 1, 2, 3 magic. Probably for everybody in the audience, nobody has ever, we've heard of the counting, you know, counting, you know, I'm going to count to 5, and if you don't stop what you're doing at 5, then, you know, something's going to happen. 1, 2, 3 magic, I've given you the name of the man who's written an updated version. 1, 2, 3 magic's been around a long time. You do not have to reinvent this wheel. Most kids, and what you would do, and I'm going to give you again just the cheat sheet. What is 1, 2, 3 magic? It means first, you're not going to be yelling and threatening a lot. You're actually going to give your child this, you're going to let them know what you're doing before it happens. And you're going to say this to them. When you do something you know you're not supposed to do, what you're going to hear is, that's a 1. If you continue to go ahead and do what you're not supposed to do, I'm going to say that's a 2. If I get to 3, there will be an immediate consequence. So you're not playing a lot of strikes and outs and you're not playing a lot of baseball. That's a 1, that's a 2. And I might even say, okay, I'm giving you an extra minute to make a good choice. But if I get to 3, I know that I'm going to give a consequence. Now, many parents have a hard time with consequences. What do you do other than time out? And parents frequently say, timeout never works for me. Well, a lot of the times, that's all we have in our back pocket. So I'm going to give you just a few ideas. One is that the 3 means they will be taking, if they're 5 years old, 5 minutes on their own. And if you've got a child who gets really anxious in a room by themselves, I'm not going to ask you to put that child in a room by themselves behind a door. But I certainly might have you sit them on a stair and say, and turn the timer on. Folks, most of the time timeout doesn't work because forgot 5-10 minutes has passed. Use the old egg timer. I mean, I know we love our phones, so use your phone if you have to, but I love a good old-fashioned egg timer for timeout. But that's not the only thing. Let's just say you're at a party and your child is really misbehaving. If you're lucky and your significant other is with you at the party, if it's a family gathering, a party, I always say, be prepared to leave. If I get to a 3 at a party or a restaurant, and with young children, even a grocery store, you should always be prepared to leave your basket full in the grocery store. If you bring your child with you to the grocery, let's just say, and you know they're probably tired, then it's your fault if they act up because they're going to. It's just a matter of what your tolerance is. But the 3 means we're leaving. Or if it's a play date and your child is acting up, 3 means the play date is over. Now, if you've got a child at your house and your child is the host, then you might be playing with that child and your child may be by themselves for a few minutes. Another thing is time out the toy. That is or they're not listening to you because they're so glued to the tube. Then just time out the screen, whatever screen they're on. Of course, we could go on and on about screens. It's not my first choice in the first 5 years of life, honestly. We could all do without screens for all of us, but especially our young kids. You could even say, if you get to 3 and it's the bedtime hour, you're going through all those rituals. I always, when Pete went to bed, I always read 2 books. And if he started dilly-dallying or using up the time he had, I would say, that's a 1, that's a 2. If I get to 3, you've lost 1 of your books. He never lost all of the books. You need to at least have 1 book that you read for a bedtime ritual. And the reason is because bedtime is another time they have to separate. You need the ritual to stay in place. And books help to transition kids away from you by bringing them into another world. It's really magical. So when I say consequences, don't punish yourself, because discipline's not about punishing, but don't punish the kid either. Does anyone in the audience use 1, 2, 3 magic? I'm just curious. Does anybody? Does it work sometimes, or?
Yes.
It doesn't. So again, this is 1 mantra, 1 tool. When I parent coach, I have parents who come in and say, I tried that, and it doesn't work. So not everything works for every child, but sometimes, for some of my parents, they're talking too much to their kids. They're like lawyers with their kids. They're chatting it up, they're trying to rationalize and reason with the kids. This is a 2-year-old. They don't need you chatting them up at, between 5 and 7, which are the twilight hours. They need 10 seconds or less. And especially if they are becoming tired and hungry, then you need to feed them, put them to bed, and not do a lot of time trying to be lawyerly about it. So the second mantra. Jen Coulter and I were talking right before you all came in, and there's a wonderful teacher here, Brandon, and he does what I call Zen Mode all day long. You rarely hear Brandon raise his voice, and by the way, all of your Montessori teachers have Zen Mode. But for whatever reason, Brandon comes to mind first, because I can walk in and sometimes there's a lot going on, but he's just chill. I wish I could tell you that this came naturally to me, but if you can just watch me walking around here, you can kind of tell. Even in my older years, I'm still a little on the hyperactive end. So learning Zen Mode was not easy as a mom. What do I mean by this, though? It means when we feel emotional as parents, which we're all going to feel. I don't know about you, but there was nothing like having a child and then that child making me so angry, I never realized I could get that angry, or frustrated, or emotionally overwrought, or worried. I just didn't think it ever got that big, but it gets big with your own child. There's something that goes on such a primitive level. But if when we get angry and frustrated, what we're doing is yelling and taking it out on the child, you're not really in Zen mode. You're really modeling something that in my next mantra, I really don't want you modeling. So Zen mode means keeping that voice as best you can. Pretty even. Now here's the thing. Did I get angry at my son? Absolutely. And sometimes what I did when I could feel my heart starting to race and pump with anger, I would say to Peter, okay, here's the choice you have. You can have my angry voice or you can have my talking voice. Which is it gonna be? Now my angry voice is not a screaming voice, but it's this voice you're hearing. It's got a little bit of an edge. In fact, when I'm with my mom and I'm headed to New Orleans tomorrow, I know when my mom is angry because she's got that edge. And I used that to my advantage because she didn't scream at us, but she had that edge. And Peter never liked my edgy, angry voice. So when I gave him the choice, frequently he would stop what he was doing and he would choose the talking voice. So Zen really means just a low, firm voice. And by the way, another tool I'm going to offer you is if you feel that whatever's going to come out of your mouth is not going to be kind or productive or helpful, then take a timeout. Not enough parents model for their children what it is to take a timeout. And I'd actually tell Peter, I need a timeout. I am angry. I don't even know what the consequence should be, so I want you to think about what the consequence should be, and I'll be back. I'd literally walk to one end of the house and back again. And by the time I got back, about 4 years old, I would say, what do you think the consequence should be? And he would say something completely like punitive, which was great, because whatever I was going to say was going to sound a whole lot better. But it gave me time just to show him that when you get really frustrated, instead of just letting it out, kind of take some time with it. Give yourself a timeout, and you can let your child know that's what I'm doing. It usually stops the behavior, by the way. Now, for really young children, it can create anxiety if you leave them. And that is where it gets a little problematic with some of our really young ones. Some of our techniques create more anxiety for them, therefore the behavior continues, and you've got this bad dance going on. You're frustrated, you're trying to figure it out, and they're anxious, get over anxious, and they get riled, and then you have pretty much the dance that's not working for anybody. So try to stay in Zen mode. That's my second mantra. The third mantra, choose your battles wisely. And I'm going to say, especially during the twilight hours, between 5 and 7, we know it from research, this is the worst time for families. It's when a lot of bad things happen. And it's certainly, think about your kids. They've had a long day. You've had a long day. So don't pick every battle. And I say, if your child is done, a lot of us get very anxious if our kids don't have a full meal. And I say, if you've done your job well, and they've come to school, they've had snacks, they've had meals. Yes, you need a third big meal, but sometimes you just need to get them ready for bed and call it a night. And give them cheese or yogurt, maybe as a snack right before, but don't get so hot and bothered about the feeding them. And remember what I said, 2 books is always a good way to get them settled to go to bed, because you can always take one away if it's taking you too long. There are always a lot of sleep issues, a lot of sleep questions. And one thing I want to suggest, we happen to be in Philadelphia where there's some amazing people here. If your child has had ongoing sleep issues, Dr. Jody Mendel is at Children's Hospital, happens to be, she's written a lot of great books, they have a great clinic there. I've sent a lot of my parents to Jody because sometimes sleep is the beginning of all the other issues. If you've got an overtired child all the time, then you frequently have all the behavioral issues that accompany that. So I really, again, when I talk about prevention, if you were to ever come to see me, I'm big on occupational therapy if your child has some fine motor issues. I'm big on speech and language therapy because you can intervene early and really prevent some bigger issues from happening later on. There's lots of things we can do in the early years. Fourth mantra, you are your child's best role model. This is a little bit of what I was talking about earlier. You need to show your child by example what you want them to be able to do when they finally have that boss and that job. If your child doesn't learn to cope with their anger and frustration, and they see you screaming and carrying on when you get angry and frustrated at home, either it will come out later in life with a boss, or it will come out later in life with a significant other. They may learn to keep it underground, except for in their private life, but that's not what you want for your child. You want to start now modeling what is good emotional intelligence. And if this is hard for you, I promise, and I'm not the only one in the city who can help, but one parent coaching session sometimes can help someone understand what I mean by this. It's so important to be able to show compassion to your child and empathy. Also show them how you bounce back if bad things happen. How do you do it? If you make a mistake as a parent, you've said something that's not so nice, be sure that you model how to apologize. And I don't mean just saying I'm sorry. I teach my girls through role play at kindergarten how to make a decent apology, because I find way too many people out there don't even know. They might know how to say I'm sorry, but you can tell from their facial expression or how they're delivering it, they don't really mean it. So I teach my girls how to look someone in the eye and say it like you mean it, and also how do you repair it? What do you say that you're going to do differently in the future? And as a parent, if I've said something that's hurtful, then I need to say to my child, sweetie, I'm really sorry. I lost my patience, and I should have taken a timeout, because what I said was really not nice, and it was actually hurtful. And as a parent, my job is to keep you safe, remember? And that wasn't emotionally a safe thing for me to do. That was hurtful. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I will try to do a better job next time. But we are human beings, so you are going to make a lot of mistakes. And after tonight, if you leave here thinking, oh my gosh, you know, kids are resilient. That's what I did my research on. And I did my research on kids that were born prematurely, and some of them lived in some very dire circumstances. There is tremendous resilience. So if you've not done the perfect job of parenting, which really nobody else has either, then just start today following at least this mantra: you are your child's best role model. Express your anger firmly but respectfully. By the way, positive parenting is all about not just expecting the child to be respectful, but you have to start by being respectful as a parent. We are so respectful to our friends, and we're so respectful, most of us, to our bosses. But we're not always respectful to our kids. And then we wonder where some bullying happens, and I look on the playground and I see kids coming in, and I'm thinking it probably started somewhere in the family. Sometimes it's between siblings, but sometimes it's because parents use a form of that to control kids. And there's too many good techniques out there. Sixth mantra, so we have two more and then I'm going to open it up to some questions. Catch your child in the act of doing it right. We talk to our teachers every day about doing this. This, from the research, we know. This is like the one thing you can do, and it absolutely gets more positive behavior to occur. When I'm teaching a class and I've got some kids who are acting out, what I'll do is, instead of pointing out, Tom, you are not listening to me, I will say, thank you, Eleonora, sometimes I'm teaching them relaxation. I'll just thank them for quieting their body. And then I'll thank the next one who immediately quiets their body. And then the next one. And then by the time I'm done, I've thanked every single child in that room for quieting their body. Catch them in the act of doing it right. So many of our kids, we inadvertently as parents reinforce the negative behavior by that's what we give them attention for. It's called negative attention. And we forget. If we just catch them when they're doing it right, usually you'll get more of that. So especially during those twilight hours, catch them. Okay, let's just say dinner time's it's been a bomb. The little one is not sitting, the other one is screaming. It feels like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Find somebody, even if it's your significant other. Thank you, significant other, for talking with me, for listening, for eating peacefully. And then a little sense of humor goes a long way. Again, if I wished I had more Zen, I've had to develop it over time, and I wished I had a better sense of humor, but when I use it with kids, oh my gosh, it is so much fun. Because sometimes when bad things are happening and I just get a little of that going, it can stop them in their tracks. Most of us forget, unless you have a great sense of humor, and then you're always using it, and good for you, because I wish I had had that innately. I had to learn. It is really the most powerful tool, this catching them in the act, and be specific. You hear this, see this in every single book. I am not saying tell your child good boy, good girl. I am saying I really love that you just shared your toy with your brother. How generous of you to do that. 10 seconds or less, that's all it took. Seventh mantra. And this is the easy one for you because you may already know this. We're not in a race. You've come to a Montessori school where you know that we are not going to push your child in a way that's fast and furious. You've come to an environment where you want to have your child embraced as the individual that they are, for your teacher to meet your child where they are and to then move them further in the ways that they need to be moved in all areas of their development. Parenting is a marathon. It is truly not a race. I know we all want our kids to read and do high levels of math, but doing it at age 4 and 5, even though for some Montessorians that does happen, but if it doesn't happen for your child's going to be fine. In fact, the research says that your child, most kids by 2nd grade, pretty much even out. Even the child who started reading early, he's looking kind of on the levels that the other 2nd graders are. Are there gifted kids? Absolutely. Do they zoom ahead pretty quickly? Some of them. Some gifted kids, they struggle because things are really easy for them in the beginning, but the social world becomes more complex, and even the academic world. They don't develop the grit they need. So the reason Montessori is this wonderful embrace, it will help with that love of learning that research says our kids need to get through all the years we want for them to be. If your goal is, even if it's not college, you want to get them through high school, they're going to need to love to learn. And they're going to need the grit. And they're going to need to be curious enough. And you don't want a lot of rote learning, because we all know that's only one facet of your memory. Rote learning is just that. It's not really in-depth understanding. It's just I can spit back what you just said to me. I want in-depth understanding. And so much of what we do here allows for that exploration. A couple of other things. I really believe optimism, which is now something you hear a lot about. A lot of kids are anxious and depressed, and they need to learn to see their glasses half full, not half empty. Pain. Our kid comes home, they share with you something bad happened. The teacher said something, or some other child wasn't nice, and we interview for a lot of what was wrong. And what we forget is, and again, you have to trust your teachers to be doing their job. It's not that you can't acknowledge that was hard, whatever it was, but let's look at this glass half full. Who did you sit with at lunch that you liked to talk to? What did happen? What work did you do today that you actually enjoyed? Optimism, seeing the glass half full, is really important. And finally, think about teaching your kids, as we do in Montessori. You know, I think cooking, banking, cleaning, these are all things we start here, especially the cooking and the cleaning. And I don't think we continue it on in our families. And I truly think that if we have all of our kids be ready to know what to do with their own money and know how to cook for themselves and clean for themselves, they'd be really better prepared for what's out there. This is a book I brought with me, again, thanks to Jen Coulter. This book, I Can Handle It, I forgot to mention when I talked about emotionally coaching kids. One of the things that I do is I use a lot of what I call bibliotherapy, fancy word for read good books to your kids that help with emotions. This one I listed in your mantras. It is one of the best books I have found for, you know, when I feel angry. It gives you 5 things that your child can do when they feel frustrated, 5 things that they can do. These are called coping skills. So I want you to model how to say, I am angry because. I want you to use those words with your kids. Use all the emotional words. Model how to use an emotional vocabulary. Show them how you cope with your emotions. Instead of screaming and yelling, these are the things sometimes that I need to do. Sometimes I go and exercise, and that helps me. It's no irony, my son, every day I hear him coming back from work, he either starts his day with exercise or ends. Same with my spouse. So we use exercise as one of our coping skills to kind of dissipate, but there's so many out there. This book is the first one to kind of help you figure out what does she mean by coping skills anyway at an early age. So I want to open it up for the last 10 minutes. Questions, thoughts, or mantras that you use that I didn't mention. Something that you find helpful. Eleanor, yeah.
I had a question if you could speak a little bit about time in versus time out. How does that work, and just how do you go about it?
So I don't use time in. Jen?
We don't use that strategy here.
Okay.
Not that it's, I mean, I've heard it, and I could probably, I could try to, but I don't want to present myself as a time in, time out person. But personally, it sounds like, as opposed to doing a timeout, just being with the child.
Right.
And by the way, I think that proximity to parents when kids are upset is, you are their emotional container. And sometimes it's just, instead of getting upset with their anger, just sitting with the emotion. What I would call time in would mean me being okay with having my child being upset and not getting overwrought, and just being zen, using some of the mantras I talked about. I would love to explore more. Does anybody else time in? Does anybody use time in? Time out? It's probably something that I could spend a little bit more time understanding, but I suspect we all do it, we just might not call it that. Yeah?
When you say bringing attention to the negative behavior can exacerbate it,
Yes.
or keep it recurring, so is there ever a time where we should just ignore it versus try and do the 1, 2, 3 or another kind of Zen approach?
Yeah. So sometimes when I say pick your battles wisely, I really mean it. If I'm in a grocery store and I've got to get these groceries because there's going to be no other time this week, then I'm not picking that battle, and I'm probably ignoring some not so great behavior. And if everybody in the grocery is looking at you like you are not doing your job, what is wrong with you? You know, and this woman, I just had this vivid memory, this kid was wailing at the checkout, and I was like, what is wrong with you? You can't, and she commented, are you singing for everybody today? Is that what you're doing? She used it as sense, because you could tell she had to get those groceries. And she couldn't do anything for the screaming Mimi in the cart, and she, and there was no consequence that was really gonna, so she used a sense of humor. So yes, do not pick every battle. I had a few kids who I observed today, at a school, and I think their parents are not picking enough battles. I think the kid has learned how to whine and tantrum to get their way, and so some parents don't pick enough. But I don't want you to pick every one. And certainly between 5 and 7, remember my adage, get them to bed as quickly as you can in Zen mode. Because they're separating from you, and frequently if we're upset and we're yelling and screaming, bedtime's not going to go well, folks. You're going to be anxious, they're going to be anxious, and you are going to have like, woo, a lot of good stuff going on, but it's not going to be so good. Right? So hopefully that answers. Is there a question? Yeah.
Yeah, so is there an alternative approach to the grocery store, play date, dinner situation where the consequence of leaving is the desired outcome for the child?
Meaning excusing them?
They want to get out of the grocery store and they realize like, all I have to do is this, and that's mine.
So absolutely, there are kids who don't want to stay at the family table. They're done. And I say in the first 5 years of life, your goal is to get your child by about 5 or 6 years old to be able to sit at the table. I mean, my son Peter couldn't sit for longer than 10 minutes. That was a good meal for him. By the time he was 8, he was sitting for a good, sometimes hour. But when he was younger, he only wanted to eat to fuel himself. So I didn't make that a battle. If he could learn to sit, and he eventually, he got to 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I would, if we went to a restaurant, I'd be entertaining. I'd bring the colors and the, different puzzles and things, because I knew he wanted to move and groove. So some kids do act out because they want out. But I think developmentally we have to think about our expectations. I have a child who's Asian, and her mother loves to go for these long meals with her significant other for 2 hours. And she's wondering why her child doesn't like to go out to a restaurant. And I had to say to my friend, it's too long. Get the babysitter if you want the 2-hour meal, or change your expectations and cut the meal short. I think sometimes we don't know developmentally what we should be expecting. If I go to a grocery store with my child, remember, my expectation is, and their job is to test you. By 2 years old, it's their job, right? That's what the Terrible Twos is all about. They only can control 2 things, what goes in their mouth and out their bottom. So no wonder they're constantly looking for power and control in all kinds of ways that you wish they would. Which is why I rarely choose battles with food. I rarely. I had my own battles as a kid. I have my own memories of my mother. I wanted to go to Mary Roy's house spend the night. My mother was making me eat that liver. 2 hours. I was eating that liver. Well, guess what? I probably ended up taking a few more bites because I really wanted to go to Mary Roy's house. But I would never do that to my child. I told my mom, you did it wrong.
So you're talking about developmentally appropriate stuff. And at what age are consequences, like, are children able to process the idea of consequences? I feel concerned that having any kind of consequence for my 3-year-old just escalates the situation, and I wonder if she understands it and is able to learn from it. And I worry about that, and I was just wondering.
You're not the only one who worries, and you're not the only one who might not choose a consequence because you're wondering. Children's receptive language, always remember, is so much further advanced than their expressive language. They understand a lot by 6 months to a year. Unless they have some auditory processing issues or hearing issues, which can definitely happen. And I don't want to dispute that there are some kids who truly, in your gut, they are not getting what you are teaching them. And I want you, no matter what I have said tonight, if your gut instinct about your child says consequences just don't make sense to them, I would probably prefer a coaching session to talk about what some other strategies we could talk about. I truly believe that starting at 2, And probably we use a lot more natural consequences for certain things, like if they don't eat, they get hungry. That's a natural consequence. It's not a bad consequence, because you know you're going to give them a snack 2 hours later anyway, or even an hour later. Natural consequences. But I can't let my child ride their bike into the street, because that natural consequence is deadly. So I have to always think logically. If you cannot be responsible with your bike on the sidewalk, then the bike goes in timeout. Now that's a consequence I'm almost positive most of my 2- and 3-year-olds get, because the toy has gone away, the thing they want has gone away. You can put things away, they get that. Now they're going to whine and carry on, but that's their job. They're going to make you feel bad, guilty. You mean mom and dad, and they may even say I hate you, or you are such a mean mommy. But guess what? This is what I mean by being an emotional container, folks. If you can't take I hate you or you are mean, you are not going to survive adolescence. I want you to practice now with your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old. When they get mad at you, I want you to be, yes, I'm doing my job. Because they need to learn how to be mad at someone and see that you recover. I had a little girl just on Wednesday say in my Let's Care, my class that I was teaching, we were going around the room talking about how do you feel today? And she was saying, I'm sad because I had a fight with my mom. And it really upset her. And I said, you know, I know just how that feels. When I get upset with my mom, it never feels good. But guess what? When you see her today, what do you think's gonna happen? She says it's gonna be okay. I said yes, because people who love each other, we get angry and we get mad, but we get over it, right? That's a part that you wanna teach them. This is the emotional intelligence we're talking about. If all the time the anger is put under the rug, then you never learn how to handle it. If all the sadness goes under the rug, your child is going to be handicapped, and they are going to get anxious and depressed, because that's what anxiety and depression is. It's emotion that goes unexpressed, or sometimes it's too much focus on the emotion. Some parents, they're like, anytime any anxiety walks through their door, they're like, and they make the anxiety more and more and more until you've got an anxiety disorder. Which is why I like my books about kids that experience emotions and they get over them. So to answer your question, a 3-year-old absolutely learns from consequences, but use your gut always. Yes?
I have a question. During a tantrum,
Yes?
try to communicate with children usually get into this vicious circle where they're just listening to themselves.
Yes.
How do you approach that? Do you still try to communicate with them, or do you disengage?
It's a great question. So I wish Brandon were here, because he's got a very Zen policy towards tantruming. First of all, if a kid's in a full-blown tantrum, talking to them is not a good idea. Learning how to just be in that moment, figure out in your brain. The thing, your goal is quick recovery. I had a child I observed today who was tantruming, but she got over it really quickly. That's a good sign. That means the tantrum was probably for the adult's benefit. I don't like what you just told me. I'm going to throw my tantrum, but she recovered. So you are looking, if you've got a child who tantrums a lot, how quickly do they recover? And what might you be doing to reinforce the tantrum? When we talk to a child when they're tantruming, that reinforces it. If I just sit quietly, if I'm in Zen mode, I'm just waiting it out. Now Peter I didn't have a child who picked tantruming as their way of expressing their anger. He would do and go and put himself in timeout, and he'd be like looking at me like, aren't you gonna follow me? And I would be like, yes, He's doing just what I want him to do, going to timeout without me saying it. Because really, I want all your kids to know anger's okay, but you're really, mostly when you're that angry, you need to go and spend some time on your own. Without mom or dad saying, get to that room. And that's really not what it should be about. So to answer your question, it's not a time to talk. I might even use a countdown method. I might just go 10, 9. I might just try to use calming methods. I might actually say, I'm gonna breathe, I'm gonna do some hand breathing, inhale. And I'd be like talking to myself. I'm not trying to get my child who's tantruming, but I'm just trying to keep myself cool, calm, and collected, and maybe, just maybe, inhale, exhale. I'm trying to keep myself from going there with the child. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Just do something that totally is different from what's going on. There's all kinds of funny, inhale, exhale. There's volcano breath, inhale, exhale. I mean, you can see, like, I was a dancer, so I can, movement is a great place for me to go when I've got a tantruming child, because it helps me just relieve whatever stress I'm feeling while watching that tantrum. If I've got a child who's hurting themselves, I teach my parents how to do a basket hold, because I truly believe our job is safety first. If I've got a child who's a really big tantrumer and they start with that head banging and their whole body is, then I will practice with them at a calm moment. What is a basket hold? It means that I'm sitting with my legs around them and my arms are over their arms, and I count down to 10 and I release the legs once the legs are no longer flailing. And then I count down to 10 and I release the arms, but they're still sitting right here. They're getting the containment, but they're getting also my physical safety. Sometimes kids, if you go into a basket hold, it makes it worse. But sometimes it stops it. So again, I always want you to have a lot of tools, because one size does not fit all. If you've got a child who's tantruming a lot, and some of the mantras that I've said to you tonight do not work, I would really like you to visit a parent coach here in town. I think we have a name for you here in town, or take an hour with me, because I've seen young kids who go on with some of these really tough behaviors in elementary, middle, and high school, and they can turn into some bigger problems. The child who whines and tantrums all the time thinks that's appropriate. In middle school, it is not. Kids are not going to be too tolerant. So we're at 7. I wanted to promise I would get you out on time. I hope that you can take away at least 1 or 2 tonight. Feel free to ask me questions after. I'll stay here a few minutes.